Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, a podcast where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing that you are invited, seen, heard, and needed. I am your host, Christopher Bylone. This is more than a podcast. It is a movement, a mirror, a megaphone, one where raw truth meets radical hope. Today's guest is a behavioral inclusion expert who is turning data into action and allyship into impact. Dr. V, yes, the doctor stands for psychologist, is the CEO of Mattingly Solutions and the author of Act Like an Ally, Work with an Ally, a practical guide for building inclusive workspaces that actually work. She is known for blending science, strategy, and soul to help organizations move beyond checkbox DEI performance into measurable, meaningful change. Whether she is coaching leaders, designing interventions, or speaking on stages, Dr. V brings a bold voice, a sharp mind, and a whole lot of heart. Get ready for a conversation that is smart, actionable, and unapologetically inclusive. Dr. V, welcome to I Know I Belong When.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you, friend. It's exciting. Like we've had so many conversations and now we get to record one of them.
I know. Can I share our very first conversation because it's one of my favorite stories?
Please.
Okay, so we're in Savannah, Georgia for a
Oh my God, yes.
conference. And if you've never been, the convention center is across the river from like downtown Savannah. And so they have this great, every half hour, a different shuttle coming in to take people across the river. And I'm standing in line for the shuttle and I get this little tap on my shoulder. And who would have known it's Christopher? And he says, I love your book. No content. You didn't say where you work. You didn't say what you did. It was just like, I love your book. And of course, as an author, I love hearing that, especially at a conference like that where there's so many DEI practitioners, because that's who we wrote the book for, Inclusalytics. So we sit down and you're all excited to tell me about how you've used different definitions in the book and your own strategy. And you pulled out your cell phone. You're showing me like slides of the strategy. And I'm like, okay, hold up. Where do you work? And at the time, it was this huge national corporation with tens of thousands of employees that are impacted by the work we did in Inclusalytics by you using some of that content to build your strategy. And it was just such a beautiful moment because you put a book out there, you don't know who's going to read it, if they're going to read it. And to meet you under such cool circumstances, talking about DEI, sitting on this ferry going into downtown Savannah, Georgia, it's just one of my favorite book impact memories. So thank you for
Well, it was a little bit of a fangirl moment. I'm not going to lie. Right. Like, because it's still like there are times, imposter syndrome creeps in all the time. And so here I am. Yeah, I am a head of DEI for a major corporation. But here is somebody who I have been read their book, watching their work, engaging with you on LinkedIn, never met you in person. And here you are literally standing in front of me. And I'm going, well, I'm not going to pass up this moment. Right. And so I was like, okay, hopefully my hero lives up to what the persona that I have built of her. And not only did you live up to it, you surpassed it. So,
Oh, thank
and what a beautiful friendship that it has created since then. And honestly, I will say, I did forget a little bit about how we met. So thank you for bringing that memory to me. Just because the friendship has just been there and just, and then we've had so many other interactions. And so, it's one of those where, the friends you have, you kind of like, you forget where it started. And then, it just is like you've been friends forever. And that's what it kind of
you.
feels like. So this is a conversation between friends. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, and I love that you were fangirling. I love that. That makes me feel good.
Okay, so enough fangirling moments on both of our sides.
Mhm.
Let's get into the conversation. So your work has centers on allyship as a shared journey, which is really fascinating to me. What does it mean to be invited into a space like this podcast where belonging is at the heartbeat of the conversation?
Okay, so I consider allyship, yes, to be a two-way partnership, and I'm happy to, go deeper there in a moment. But the way I define inclusion, allyship is just another form of a special inclusion where you're working in partnership with someone who's different than you to solve systemic barriers based on whatever that difference is. So, male allies for women, white allies, people of color, straight allies for the LGBTQ community. And for allyship or just inclusion in general to work, you need to make someone feel valued, respected, seen, and heard. Very similar to the definition that you shared at the beginning of the podcast. And so a true ally makes someone feel like they belong. Inclusion's the action, belonging's the outcome. And so allyship, especially for those listening who have privileged identities, which is not a bad thing if you use it for good, right? I think people think
Right.
the keyword is like this big bad word and something to be ashamed of. But in actuality, if you are someone that holds a privileged identity, you can foster inclusion and belonging through your acts as an ally, which must be, as you said, in partnership with the individual or the group that you're trying to serve.
Yeah, that's really important. I think, for folks listening, watching, privilege is not bad. It's how you use it,
Yeah.
right? And so, I recognize that right now we are two individuals who are of white skin, and that comes with privilege. So how are we using it for good? And how are we making sure that we are opening the spaces that need to be opened, and not just opening the spaces, but amplifying those voices? One of the things that I really love about your work is that you talk about allyship is not a title, it's a practice. Right? It's truly a verb. So, what is the one thing that you're practicing right now that allows you to feel more connected to your purpose?
So by considering both allyship and inclusion to be an action, to be a verb, I always say both to myself and to others, never call yourself an ally. It,
Mm,
it's a bad look. It's assuming allyship is, as you said, an identity, which it is not. You know you're doing allyship right when someone calls you their ally. I wrote about this moment in my book because it just meant the world to me, but I'm really involved in so I'm an organizational psychologist, as you shared, and then there's an organization called Blacks in IO Psychology, and I actually found this organization right after George Floyd was murdered. I really wanted to do something not performative, but really meaningful and purposeful, and when I found this organization, not only I was like, "Wow, this is, an organization amplifying and supporting the Black individuals in our field, like, that's amazing," and they had an ally membership. So I truly felt like there was a place for me as a white
mm,
person in this organization. And I've done webinars with them. I've been a mentor. Mattingly Solutions been a sponsor for their conference. And I was talking with their founders. I get goosebumps when I think about this. I was talking to the founders of the organization, and they just said straight up to me, like, "You're our ally. Like, you're an ally to us, and you've always been, and you always will be." And just to like get that confirmation after all
mhm.
those years of really trying to show up and act like an ally. That's why that's the name of the book is Act Like an Ally, Work with an Ally. And so it's just reminding myself every day that I have opportunities every day to show up as an ally. And when I'm aware of my privileges, I can invite others in, notice when there aren't people at the table. I went to a networking event last night and I told the host, I was like, thank you for inviting people of color and women. Because most of these events
Mhm.
I go to, it is just a bunch of middle aged white men. And I love middle aged white men. I'm married to one, right? But like, that's not. That's not a diverse setting, right? In Pittsburgh, where I live, it's it has a very large Black population. And so if you're having an event and you don't have Black representation, you don't have female representation, you are leaving people out, not just of that event, but of that community and of
Yeah,
the
no,
opportunities. There were movers and shakers in that room last night that could change someone's life with an investment or with the right connection or opportunity. I think it's both acting like an ally and then also calling out when people are doing allyship behaviors like this. I
right.
told the host last night, I'm like, I can tell you made sure you had a diverse guest list because if you
Yeah, and
didn't,
and and
you
and
wouldn't have been.
and to your point, right? I think sometimes in this work, we sometimes focus a lot on what people shouldn't be doing. And
Mhm.
we're always giving the examples of don't do this. And what we need to also be doing is making sure that we're amplifying the good work that is being done and actually demonstrating what is the right thing to do. Because people, that's all what people are looking for. They're just like, we want to do the right thing, but we don't know how. And
Yeah.
so if we're only telling them what not to do, and we're not training them or educating them on what to do, how do we expect them to behave in the way that we want them to behave, right? So let's start demonstrating and calling out and amplifying the good work that is being done. Also, because we really do need a lot of good news these days, don't we?
We do, my goodness. So that's actually the approach I've taken to workplace inclusion since day one. I
Mm,
started my journey in the allyship space. That's what my dissertation was on in 2017, 2018. And I've always taken a very, as you said, like, let's take a positive approach. I think about psychology, and people are far more influenced by positive reinforcement than negative. Right. And so
mm,
I can help people understand what are micro affirmations as opposed to just beating them down with microaggressions, right? If I can,
right.
instead of beating them down with bias and discrimination and all the isms, let's talk about what the positive behaviors look like. And that's why I
Yes.
really spent a lot of time studying not only allyship behaviors, but inclusive leadership behaviors, everyday inclusive behavior, micro affirmations that I mentioned. Now, I did get some criticism early on in my career that it was privileged of me to just skip over the microaggressions, skip over the biases,
Mm,
and jump right into the positive. So since then, I still address, the darker side, but I really focus on empowering my audiences, especially with keynotes that I'm now
right.
focusing almost solely on, empowering my audience to leave with some very clear and tangible strategies on how to be allies rather than leaving from a place of shame, defensiveness, fragility. I think most people have gone through that phase at this point with DEI, and that's why I truly believe allyship's the next step because
Yes,
we left a lot of people out. We left a lot of people out,
we
Christopher. I
did.
don't like I just I know the movement. I don't mean us specifically, but the movement left a lot of people out. And allyship is a really intentional way of inviting people back in and be part of the
Yeah, 100%. And one of the reasons why I wanted you to be on the show. So, want to kind of keep the conversation moving forward. So, one of the big things that I am a proponent of is getting somebody's name right.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
and your book names dozens of partners and allies who have shaped your journey. Who's the name that you want to talk out loud right now, today, and why?
Oh my gosh, there's so many I talked about in the book. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna be vulnerable. So, I've needed allies in lots of areas of my life as a first generation college student, grad student, coming from a low SES background, as a woman in the workplace, as a parent, as someone who had cancer, as someone who has alopecia. I've needed allies for all these things. But the time that I needed allies the most was when I went through a major mental health crisis a couple years
Mm,
ago. I had so many allies come out of the woodwork, people taking care of me, working around the clock, behind the scenes. And my husband was the greatest ally to me in
mm,
that situation. He was my neurotypical ally to someone who was having a major mental health crisis. And we weren't even getting along at the time, Christopher. And that's a point about allyship too, is it's not easy,
no.
and he had to be my ally while we were very turbulent, like very, and so he had to step out of our marriage, step out of, being in that moment to be my ally because I wasn't taking care of myself and I was
Mm,
making bad choices. And that even though we were, arguing with each other, he was still my ally, talking to all these people behind the scenes, making sure I was safe. And then after months and months of couples therapy, we are stronger than we've ever been. And you know, I messed up a lot in that situation. I wasn't well, but I still,
right.
made bad choices. I moved out. I did all these things, right? And allyship isn't always about holding hands and running off, frolicking and doing all these right things together and changing the world. Like, it can be really tough. And you can get pissed off at your ally or your partner. My
Right.
ally was pissed at me. I was pissed at him. Things were not good, but he stood firm and was my ally throughout that entire process. We spent months afterwards, remending our relationship. And that's why allyship as a partnership is so important. You don't just give up
Yep.
on your ally or your partner unless they really suck. Like I even put in the book,
Right.
there are times where you should drop an ally, right? There are times where you should drop a partner. But at the end of the day, it's staying connected, it's nurturing that relationship, it's weathering the hard times
Yes.
and then making it through, and now I can look back on this, and I actually dedicated one of the books to him because it's 2 books in one as my greatest ally, and,
Oh, that's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
There's also a strong thread of sponsorship that is running through that story,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
About making sure that even though you weren't in a particular room or in a particular space,
mhm.
he was there making sure that your network was still okay, right? And
Yeah,
and that's sponsorship, right?
yeah,
And so I think that there's also some work that we need to make sure that allies understand that they're in their role as sponsors, which is great. And that's a whole nother conversation, right?
yeah.
So want to kind of keep it moving forward. This is probably going to be a great segue in talking about the moment that you knew you belonged.
Mm.
And what was that moment for you? And how did that shape the trajectory of your career?
So I have an example just from last night. So,
Go for it.
I can't say how it shaped my career quite yet, but, so just last night, so as I mentioned earlier, I have alopecia. I'm completely bald on my head, and it's kinda like being naked a little bit, like having a naked head, it's very
Yeah.
vulnerable. So I usually wear a wig like I am today, or I wear a head wrap. And last night I had this like cute little black dress on, a pink head wrap, pink shoes to match. I'm feeling all good. And the entire night, no one said anything, like no one acknowledged the head wrap. And that was fine. I don't need acknowledgement, right? But towards the end of the night, this gentleman asked, and we were talking a while, talking about the book, talking about what, work and stuff. And at the end of our conversation, he's like, "Can I ask you a question?" And that first and foremost is such a powerful statement, when it
Yes.
comes to connecting with someone because they could say no or like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that right now." But like by asking, you're opening that door for
Yes.
vulnerability and authenticity. And so he's like, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." He's like, "Why do you wear the head wrap?" And in that moment, Christopher, I felt so acknowledged and seen because I was the
Mm,
only one there with a head wrap on. And I'm constantly in fear of people thinking I have cancer. I've had cancer. I don't currently have cancer, right? I'm not in chemo, right? I'm not
right.
trying to make some fashion statement. I lost this hair. It wasn't my choice. And I wear these wraps to, feel comfortable when I go out. And him asking me and he didn't point it out, he didn't make me feel bad about it, it came from a genuine place of curiosity.
Mm,
I felt so seen. I felt like I belonged, especially something that it's a visible difference, like, I can't
yes.
hide it, and a lot of women actually try to hide it and buy, like, really expensive wigs and never take them off, right? And I'm trying to embrace my own way of doing this and not hiding it, but, and so I just felt really seen, and I think at the end of the day and I think the current state of DEI has done a good job at this, but we can't be colorblind, we can't be bald blind, we can't be, you know, gender blind. Like, we need to acknowledge each other's differences in a really curious and inviting way, and not in a discriminatory judgment way, and I really think we're getting there, and that's a really beautiful thing. And looking back retroactively, I really think all my work, whether it's inclusion, allyship, microaffirmations, really just comes down to that. Like, how can we make people feel valued, respected, seen, and heard? And last night, I felt very, very seen.
What a wonderful story. Right? I think that's really powerful and also a really good example for those who need to hear this is that when you are being an ally, you have to be curious,
Yes.
right? You can't, one, don't make assumptions, right? They could have made assumptions about why you were wearing your head wrap, right? And could have put a story together that then they then told unknowingly,
Mhm.
right? And so I think it's really important, but also our responsibility as individuals to make sure that we are putting our story out there, right? It's one of the reasons why a year ago I was so open about my weight loss journey,
Mm.
right? I was very open about having bariatric surgery because I knew I was going to go on a rapid weight loss journey and people knew I had cancer before, and what I did not want
Mm.
was the questions to come, "Is the cancer
Yeah.
okay?" Right? And I'm coming at this from a place of health,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so I wanted to, have people, one, giving me positive affirmations of like, "Hey, great weight loss," right? Like, but I also wanted it also to remove the stigma,
Yes.
right?
Oh my
To be
gosh,
talking
yes.
about, look, like I needed help to get this weight off, right? And it wasn't a yeah, what was it an assist? It was absolutely an assist, but it was an assist that was needed. And so don't be shameful of it. Own it, right? And so I think it's really powerful that yes, allies, you need to be curious about the partner that you are working with so you understand how to be their better ally. But us as partners, we also have a responsibility to put the truth out,
Yes.
right? Because how can people be an ally to us if they don't know our story?
And if they don't know what to do and don't know the barriers we face and it goes back to the book. So can I share a little bit about the book?
Yes, please do.
So what you just said is the exact reason why I wrote this book, right? Because it's two books in one. So there's a lot of books out there like this. I have a whole bookshelf of how to be an ally. But what there isn't out there is how to work with an ally, just like as you said. So for the example I gave earlier, this guy could have asked me about my head wrap, and I could have been like, "That's none of your business." Like back off. Don't talk to me about my head wrap. And that would have been a missed opportunity to connect with someone, to educate someone, to
Yep.
destigmatize women wearing head wraps. Also, I've done a lot of work about appropriation, right? Because I get a lot of my wigs and head wraps from stores and communities for the Black women community, right? So am I
Mm,
appropriating, right? So like I'm dealing with my own stuff. My point is, we need to be conscious of working with allies. We have to get rid of this cancel culture. I do say if an ally really sucks, get rid of them. I'm not saying, give someone a bazillion second chances, but we all deserve the space to mess up and work through that and do better as a result. So it's two books in one. They reference each other. So one of my favorite lines is in the partner book, I go, partners, I'm telling allies on page A42 to be courageous. So give them something courageous to do, right? And so I want the
right.
person reading this book to be like, "What's she saying on A42?" And then like flip and because and just to see and like they're supposed to read it together. And the big reveal in the end is that we allyship is fluid and we could all be allies and we could all be partners depending on where we fall on that privilege wheel, right? And so
Right.
at the end of the day, when you get to the middle of the book, it's actually the end of both books. And it says they just might end up being a partner to you. And you flip it over, you just might end up being a partner to them. And then it incentivizes you to read the other side of the book because you realize allyship is very much a fluid concept.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a multiple lane street, right?
Mhm.
So okay, so we do need to talk and not just talk about the good, but we also do need to touch on the not so great parts of all of this too, right? We wouldn't be
Mhm.
doing our due diligence if we weren't. So talk about a time when allyship missed the mark for you. How did you respond and how did you work with that individual or individuals?
Yeah. So the sad thing is, a lot of times when you get allyship wrong, there isn't that opportunity again to work with individuals, right? Because we do live in a culture where and this is why I wrote the other side of the book, right? Like whenever you do mess up, there isn't that room, there isn't that grace, there isn't that ongoing conversation. And I could have done better too at like trying to rehash that relationship and conversation too. So that was another missed opportunity. But let me tell you what I did. It was early in my business, and I was getting all these like partnerships and collaborations. And so I was trying to do my due diligence and have everyone that I was partnering with sign a two-way NDA. So your stuff's protected, my stuff's protected, and we can talk freely about our IP without worrying about, legal ramifications. And so there was a Black woman, similar space I'm in here in Pittsburgh, and we were going to partner together, right? And so I sent her my NDA, and she responded back and said, this is a very privileged thing to do. Like, I am a Black woman working in this field. It's rough. I'm an entrepreneur like you. You know how rough it is. And the time I would have to spend reading this and the money I'd have to spend having a lawyer read it and sign off on it, is putting up a major barrier for me to work with you and advance my business. So she didn't sign the NDA. And instead of me coming back, a true ally would have said, let's talk this through. Maybe we don't need the NDA. Like, I'm sorry. I didn't realize, my bad. But instead, I called up another Black woman friend that I have and had her pretty much console me that I'm not racist, right? I emailed the first Black woman back and said all these things I've done, all these Black partners I work with, and like, just trying, I was defensive, I was fragile, I wasted both women's times, by like having this big moment of defensiveness. And, we didn't have a partnership because of that. And, I've seen her around, we're in the same space, we're in the same city, we're very kind to one another, but we didn't get to work together, because
Mm,
I let my ego, my fragility, my defensiveness get in the way. And allies they need to have a thick skin. Like, they need to be receptive to feedback, because I don't know what it's like to be a Black woman in my field. I don't know.
correct.
And I don't want to put up extra barriers for someone and make it harder for them to succeed. But instead of taking that perspective, I made it all about myself. So
Mm,
please take that lesson, those listening, to be a true ally. It's not about you. It's not
right.
about your feelings. It's not about what you think is the right thing to do. It truly needs to be from that partner, from that individual you're working with, listening, understanding, and doing the things that's going to benefit them. That's what allyship is. And it's thankless, right? It's thankless in a lot of ways. You can't call yourself an ally, right? You can't put it on your LinkedIn profile. But you know what? I think at the end of the day, people want to help people. And allyship's a very clear and direct way to do that. Who am I? What identities do I hold? What privileges do I hold because of those identities? And how can I work with people who don't have those privileges because of their identities and make their lives better? And I think that reward, where you get to see someone do better, overcome barriers, succeed in a way they couldn't have otherwise without your sponsorship, your amplification, your support, your mentorship, your connections, that just feels good. Right, and
Yeah.
then you never know, one day, that person or someone who knows that person could very well be your ally too. Like, karma is a thing, and I feel like
It
allyship
is.
is a perfect way of showing how, even someone who belongs to all the identity groups, like my husband, he, white, straight, hetero, neurotypical, all the things. But when he was a new dad, he needed friends. I was at work during the day, he worked at night, he was with the baby all day. And they're literally called mommy and me classes. Like, he was so excluded from the
Right.
classes. He needed some parent friends. He needed a mom ally really bad, and he didn't have one, right? So, like, we
Mm,
can all use allies, and we can all be allies too. And I think that's a very empowering thing, when people are trying to figure out how they can be helpful, how they can help make the world a better place, especially in the dark times we're in today, Christopher. It's just a nice way to
yes.
put your energy into something that's positive, right? And even though it's thankless and even though it's not about you, it still does feel good. And allies are allowed to feel good, right? That's the thing too.
Yeah.
Just because
No,
it's selfless doesn't
we
make
all
you
want to feel
feel good
good,
about
right?
it. We
Like,
want to feel
this shouldn't
good.
always just be we're in the trenches, right? Like, let's talk about the times that
Exactly.
we're,
Exactly.
celebrating success and up on the
Mhm.
pedestal and,
Yeah.
having a lot of fun, right? Because we want this to be fun,
Mhm.
right? We want to have fun. We want to party. Sometimes we gotta do the real work, right? But then other times we just want to dance, right? And
Exactly.
and let's dance. So how do we sustain that dance, right? How do we make sure that people understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint? We've been talking about the good things that we need to be doing when it comes to allyship. And we've just talked a little bit about, the things that don't work so well when it comes to allyship. But we really need to be talking about how we sustain belonging and sustain allyship going forward. And one of the things that drew me so much to you is that we're both data people, right? So this the we talked about the fangirl moment at the top of the episode. And for me, it was the first time that I saw a book that spoke my language in this DEI space, using data to actually make change. And for me, it's because I'm using the belonging formula, equity plus diversity times inclusion to the power of accessibility is the equals belonging. So when we talk about how we sustain the work that we need to do, what are some of the practices you are seeing organizations do? Because you hold a particular awesome perch that you're going to get to see many different organizations taking different approaches to this work. What are some of the next and better practices that you're seeing organizations take to sustain belonging?
I think about this stat I saw from Boston Consulting Group years ago, and they looked at the effectiveness of DEI initiatives based on whether they included allies or didn't include
Mm,
allies. And the initiatives that included allies were 3 times as effective hitting their accomplishing their DEI goal
mm,
initiatives, 3 times as effective. So, it's not like allies are like this, like, magical, these magical people that come in and make things more effective. What it is intentionally inviting allies into what I now call workplace inclusion work, because DEI has been usurped by politics and society. So to make workplace inclusion work, it's change management. It's culture
right.
change. And by actively inviting allies into that work and telling and giving them something to do, you're going to reach that critical mass far more quickly than if you were just engaging with the partners, right? So,
Mm,
some sustainability strategies I've seen, lots of big organizations have employee resource groups. What's your ally strategy around that? Can you build an
mm,
ally resource group of people with unique skills that can then serve all those ERGs? Imagine you're a comms expert, right? Imagine you are great at training. Imagine you are great at influencing at the executive level. You could join this allyship committee and work in close partnership with those ERGs to serve them as allies in ways that they might not have those skills within the ERG themselves. And not just skills, time, right? The fact that we put so much on underrepresented and marginalized groups to solve the workplace inclusion problem is
yeah,
completely unreasonable, right? We need to all get involved. None of us created, most of us did not create the systemic barriers we are dealing with
correct.
today. It was generations ago. But at the end of the day, people are still benefiting from those and people are still getting hurt from those, right? And so if we could
And
all
perpetuating them.
and perpetuating them, right? And perpetuating them. So if we can somehow adopt a culture of inclusion and belonging and allyship into how an organization operates, not just in the DEI, ERGs, all that stuff, but in the whole organization. How are we designing inclusive products? How are we using language in our organization? How are we building our pipelines in ways that's keeping diverse talent in mind, right? How are we identifying gaps and working towards active interventions to close those gaps between various demographic groups in the organization? So it has to come from the top down, but we also need that engagement from the bottom up, right? It needs to
Yeah,
come both ways. It needs to be a long-term change management experts, and we need to be actively inviting allies in because there's some interesting research done a few years ago that explored why people choose to not be allies. It's not because they're bigoted. It's not because they're apathetic. It's not because they're against allyship. It's because no one invited them in. They feel like it's
Mm,
not their place. I'm a man, I'm not going to the women's ERG. That's not my place. That's for them. I'm not gonna impede. I don't want to take resources that aren't mine, a seat that I shouldn't sit at. But no, it's the opposite. We gotta invite the people in,
yes.
for those who hold the power, the status, the privilege to help us then overcome the barriers we face. So making allyship intentional and really embedding it in your overall DEI strategy, but also thinking about all the ways that belonging and inclusion could enhance an organization's performance and building it into those systems as well. Easier said than
Well,
done.
I know it's easier said than done. Good luck, folks. No. Uh, that's why Dr. V and I are here for you,
Yeah.
right? Reach out. We're here to help. Um, so to wrap things up,
Mhm.
I am asking everyone who joins as a guest to finish the following sentence. I know I belong when.
I'm genuinely heard. If someone genuinely asks you about yourself, if someone is curious, if someone wants to learn more about who you are behind just this facade that we are bringing, into spaces. But when someone truly makes you feel heard, they're helping to kind of pull that curtain back a little bit
Hmm.
and allow for authenticity and vulnerability to occur. And that's really where the magic happens. So I know I belong when I can tell someone's truly trying to understand me, listening, trying to learn my perspective because they're trying to say, hey, you don't just belong here, all of you belongs here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Your whole bold, authentic self belongs in this space.
exactly.
Well, thank you, friend. This has been a truly exhilarating conversation. Thank you for participating and being vulnerable through this conversation. I learned so much more about you, and I'm hoping others have learned something too. So, this has been a journey that is a reminder that belonging is not a destination, is a practice, and it starts with listening.
Hmm.
So, friends, if you found this episode challenge you to move outside your comfort zone, please follow the show. Add a comment about what you will do today to be a champion to culture belonging. Thank you for listening. Know your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.